Good evening, good evening. All right, welcome to session two for the value black and white painting. This is where we get into the lighting and get into all the atmospheric perspective, fog of war, getting that London fog going on, really working on lighting within different materials. And last week, we went through and did a simple shape, a simple object. That video is uploaded to my YouTube channel now, so you can go back and check that one out. And this week, man, after seeing the updates on what you guys are doing and putting down, there are some really, really cool compositions. And so I'm hoping to bring it tonight. I want to show you guys some cool stuff when it comes to painting and getting into the details and how to be able to approach this stuff when it comes to value painting on something a little bit more complicated than just a sphere and how to be able to set up a complex scene. And that's my goal for this evening. When it comes to looking at your projects up until this point, there are a lot of paintings that everyone is doing, it seems, of a character with their back turned to the camera, looking off into the distance over a landscape. I don't know why this is the one that you guys keep on coming to and wanting to do. I'm glad that you're taking on landscape paintings. I love landscape paintings. I think they're absolutely great. But I just want to encourage you guys two things. Number one, always make sure that within these projects for digital illustration, we're keeping that narrative aspect in our paintings, right? These should be one image stories that we're telling here. And the second thing that I want to encourage you guys to do is when you are giving online feedback, please be helpful and critical with the other students in the class. I'm going to start deducting points for those responses when you guys are saying, "Oh, it looks great, awesome job," and not really giving any kind of concrete feedback or anything that's actually meaningful in your comments and just sort of checking them off the list. It's really you guys' job within this online format to be the art critics and the art directors for each other to be able to help one another get to the best compositions possible. I just want to make everyone aware of that. All right. So when it comes to this painting, the way that I've got this one set up is I've got my background plate, my gray background in here, and then I've gone through, I've got my sky all on one layer. This painting, this composition, you can see a lot of influence coming from this circus image over here on the right-hand side that I've turned to black and white to be able to help me discover the values for my painting. I am not trying to reinvent the wheel in any type of way. You can see over here on the right-hand side, I've got a very similar composition to what's going on within this surface tent, but I've changed it and modified it to make it my own, right? There are some differences there. And I'm compiling a lot of these pieces together within this next sort of industrial shot for my steampunk circus that I'm creating. I've got my big gray shape up here in the foreground, which when I turn on my sketch, you'll be able to see what that's going to turn into. It's one of those, you hit the hammer on the target and then it moves the lights up and that's going to be my foreground section. So I'm going through and within this composition, I'm blocking out each one of my major shapes and each one of my shape regions that I know I'm going to be painting within. So I've got the bottom of my circus tent, it's separated out. I've got the top portion of this whole little section over here. And I'm thinking about what I should work on within this demo this evening for you guys. There's two things that I can work through. The first one is the section with the 5 different lights and really work through the values on this tent. But I'd also like to be able to go in and work on some of the foreground elements just to be able to get you guys thinking about the shading. And that one's not that developed, so it might be best for me to be able to show you how that one's going to start to come together. But I'm happy with this one so far. I'm sort of setting in my values and taking things in broad strokes, trying not to get too into the details. I know this section up here looks very detailed right now, but just going through and making some big choices so that I can, start working through this composition. And another funky thing that's going on with this one right now, usually I like to work from my midtones into my shadows, then from my shadows into my highlights. So what you're going to see me do this evening, even though I've already got my lanterns, uh, sort of turned on this painting, I'm still going to be painting behind it and getting those shadows in there and being conscientious of how the light from these Edison bulbs is affecting this tint. Also, scale is something that I've really tried to keep in mind within this scene. So I've got, kind of normal human height would be about right here. This is moving a little bit further back, and then I'm trying to give the idea that this is quite a bit further away as well. There's probably some more shape language that I can build within this part just because it's so central to the composition to make it more interesting. But let me go ahead and turn on my sketch and show you where we are headed next. So my sketch right now is a little bit hard to see because it's in blue. Let me see if I can change that color to something a little that stand out a little bit more. Let's go with red. All right, there we go. I think that's going to be easier for us. And I'll zoom in here so that you guys can really see it on the video as well. But yeah, this is what my my big gray blob in the foreground is about to become. Same thing goes for this tent. I've got quite a few more details that I'm going to be building into that, and I'm really interested in getting that lighting from these lamps moving in and up and under this tent and building in some of that ambient occlusion within this shot. We got a lot of things that are going to light up on this. It's going to be mostly in shadow over on the left-hand side, and then within the foreground, she's hard to see as well. Turn the volume down on this so that we can see her a little bit better. All right, and zoom in. I've got a steampunk lady who is slinging the mallet down, and she's doing a really terrific job. She's going to knock the light bulbs on all the way up to the top. For polish within this one, if I was going to add it to my portfolio, I would probably consider adding quite a few more people to this scene. And I think that there needs to be someone else that's reacting and giving us some idea that, this is really surprising for how well this lady in her steampunk outfit is doing swinging this mallet. And that helps to add context to the story, right? Again, it's bringing it back to that story element for the painting. So I'm going to turn her off for now, and let's go in, and I'm not entirely warmed up today. So that's something to consider too. This part, I know it's going to be important. We got a lot of nice details in there, but this section over here is a little bit easier for me. It's not as complicated. So I want to go ahead and start warming up on that for now. I really like the way that this circus tent has got the different stripes going down it. So I want to make sure that I include that within my composition. And right now I'm at a good middle gray here, but let's go ahead and start putting some stripes on the circus tent. Once I get those stripes completed, then I'm going to start working through the details up here in this triangle area and starting to bring that to life a little bit more. And yeah, it should start to come together. Now, this ground is by no means the final pass. This is just me going through and sort of feeling my way through it. I really, really like all the thick mud that's coming up within this render right here and how chunky and sharp some of the shapes are. But what I really, really enjoy about it is the reflections on the ground, that we've got these really bright lights that are starting to show up. I believe this is likely a 3D render. So this lighting isn't, we can improve upon how it's actually working within our scene, but I want to make sure that I include something like that on the ground as well. So I get some nice bright reflective lights and give the idea that this is a very water-soaked, rainy night carnival, steampunk carnival that's going on. All right, so without further ado, all I have to do with the way that I've got my scene set up, I always work with my keyboard, a mouse, and the Wacom pen. I'm working on a Wacom tablet right now. And so what I'm doing is I am just hitting V on my keyboard to get to my selector over here. That's the hotkey for it. And then I'm right clicking, and then within the region for where the layer is at. And then once I do that, I get straight to my layer. From there, I hold down Control on the keyboard, click on the icon of that layer, and now I've got that layer region selected so that I'm not getting messy lines and painting outside of it. It helps me to be able to isolate what it is that I'm working on. You can see that I've got my dark shadow inside of the tent. One thing cool that's going on with this dark shadow within this tent is this is black, but this is also black, but it's a lighter black. So I'm incorporating some of that atmospheric perspective that's going on to where things are getting lighter. So this is a darker black than that one is. That's helping to give scale and depth to this scene. I really like within the reference image these shapes back here in the far background. I think that this is really, really well done. And so I want to make sure that I build that up appropriately and it looks correct. Right now, I think there's some more work that needs to go on with that. But here's another fun thing. So you can kind of see within my sketch, the way that I am making adjustments and changing things. So this big old pole that's running straight through the shot, that ended up over here originally, and it just wasn't a straight line. I, sat on it. I thought, okay, maybe not everything needs to be a straight line, but in the end, for the sake of building this thing out, it's going to look right. That's just going to be pretty distracting for people to look at if it's not a nice vertical pole. So creating a new layer, and I'm hitting I on the keyboard now to go in and start plucking colors from my reference image. This is exactly how I want you guys to work, right? Do not try and reinvent the wheel on these. Use another painting, another illustration to be able to help you find your values and your colors. For beginning students and more advanced students, this is a great way to work. I've got my brushes installed, and so the one that I'm going to be working with tonight is going to be the MB Line Art Legendary, not just for line art, it's also really good for shading as well. And I've got my smoothing that I want to turn on to about 20%. That's always kind of my go-to, and I'm going to bring my opacity down to 55%. All right. And there we go. So now with the 55%, that gives me the ability to be able to mess up a little bit. So I can work my way into those values. You'll see with the MB line art, when I go over it a second time, I can get rid of those textures if I want to, or I can keep them there. And so this is becoming very much like drawing with Crayola markers, right? Back in the day, where if you want to fill something in, you outline it first, and then you start going back over it. So 55%, get into the full value. I like some of these lines that are getting left in here. Some of them are starting to inform and give me some clues about how I could go through and render this shot. I want to make sure that I do get a strong line on the edge there for where the color within this tint is changing. Here's my next line. Oops. Sorry, I've got the fabric that's getting wrinkled right around here. I want to make sure that I don't forget about that. So, for those of you who are still very much attached to working with line art, line art is absolutely great, and that's what I'm doing right here. I've just blocked in and given the lines around the shape that I'm going to create, but instead of them being black outlines, they're the color that I'm going to be working within. So, it's really not as big of a jump between line art and doing these full value paintings that aren't reliant on the line art. I'm really using my sketch as sort of the prop for where the line art is going to go to. Now, because I'm creating this on its own layer, I've also got the really cool ability to be able to go back, isolate this layer that I'm working with right now, and add some more shadows and values to it later on to be able to make it match closer to what we see within the reference image. I'm also really interested in this shelf that's going out and over for the composition. So here's our last one on this side, coming around. Wish it was a little bit rounder to the ground, but that's okay. I'm going to hide it in the shading when it gets down to the bottom. There we go. Sketching the stuff in. Next up, I want to give a little bit of separation between my colors. So let's say that this, where the next one's going to go, and I'm folding the fabric around. So let's go ahead and have that line show right here. I'm doing sort of curtains, right? Is really what I'm painting right now. And let's have it start to show up right in this area. It's an okay shape. I think that it can be improved. I want to go ahead and fill in what I've got, and then I'm going to rework it just a little bit more at the edge. There we go. Stronger. All right, I like that. And yeah, so next up, we've got, let's say that the fabric is not quite as bunched up right around here. So we're going to make it a little bit thicker. Going back out, you can see the way that I'm painting right behind those light bulbs and the glow that I've already put. That glow is on a separate layer there. And we still want the fabric to be a little bit bunched up this part. To make it really thin on that side as if it's not entirely an even curtain. You can see how much this is adding to the overall shape and value and look of my entire scene. This is also causing that big dark shape within the right-hand side of the screen to fade back into the background. I'm creating colors and values that are a little bit more neutral and closer to what's going on within the sky. And that should work out pretty well. All right, this is going to be pretty light right here. I want it to be thicker. Still want the lights to show up, so, and for the fabric to have some lighting that's going on with it. This should be pretty fun. And, you know, this is one of the ways to be able to approach these paintings is I'm really thinking about, you know, this is just the warm up for me. I'm just getting my hand loose, going through, getting used to making some strokes and making some marks throughout the composition. You guys had a good weekend. Super Bowl was last night. Had some workmates at my other job that were absolutely on the struggle bus this morning, and I am not today, and it feels great. Super Bowl has got to be one of my favorite holidays in the United States. You get to eat all the good food. All right. And they have all the great commercials too. More on that here in a second. So I've got my white light lines done. The next thing that I want to do now that I've got my white lines done is let's make some choices about the background. So I'm going to go back in on my bottom layer and let's go back to what we're looking at here. So we've got some good folds that are starting to appear and then some lighter areas that are showing up as well. Because I've set these up on different layers, I should be in a pretty good spot. I'm going to just keep it safe and let's work on another layer. So go in and start giving myself a little bit of shadow underneath that shelf that I want to create. I know that all this is going to be dark right around here. I also want there to be gosh, what's that called? When you have the little tassels that are coming off the top of this tent, just to be able to give it a little bit more detail. Yeah, we've got a lot of light that's going in here, but I don't want the light to be able to penetrate all the way through. Get the idea that this is a curtain, giving it some wrinkles. Now I've got a real good opportunity here to be able to do some backlighting, some shadow underneath this section. Said that we want all this fabric good and wrinkled, so that's what I'm trying to describe here. Get some good dark lines going in to show where the light, even though it's super bright right around these bulbs, can't quite hit and get to. So just creating some wrinkles in there. And now we've got the fold that's coming down here. So we know that that's going to be shaded, nice and dark. Looking good. Go ahead and give it another larger wrinkle right around here and have that come down and over fabric. And then get it darker towards the bottom. So I am changing my my brush size while I'm going through and working. And what I'm doing is I'm left-handed. I've got my hand on the brackets on the keyboard. So the bracket keys are the ones right next to the P, just to the right of the P on the keyboard. And I'm using those left and right with my index finger and my second finger to be able to change the brush size. So I can very quickly go super large by holding down the bracket or super small by holding down the left bracket. And that's going to allow me to be able to change my brush shape really, really quick on the fly while I'm working. So we got our first shadow pass within this. Now I'm going to switch over to my, whoops. I can probably go back and add a highlight pass to this tint, but for now I want to work through this section and get my shadows in there. So again, I'm going to go back to my reference image and I want to look for some of those deeper shadows that are happening. I'm on a new layer again. Oh, One's not really giving me the darker color that I'm looking for. So let's see what else we've got. I might have to get really tight within my reference image. And I'm trying to work within the same light space that we see here. So it does go to absolute black. It's just me lightening all this stuff up for the most part. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I see. There we go. All right, that's a good color. I like that one. So we're getting our lighting going on here. So now instantly it's starting to match enough with the shadow pass that I just did on a separate layer, right? We're just thinking in sections and terms. So usually you want to go through and develop your painting all at once. We don't want to have too much time just within one little section, but because I've got these three big buildings here, each one of them, I'm kind of going to be doing separately, and then I'll end up working through the female character. But you can see overall, taking my shadow pass now. All right, nice. Get darker down at the bottom where the light is not reaching. I can probably turn down my opacity and build just a little bit better. And we got that nice dark shadow. It's coming at the base there. That's all feeling pretty good, but I still want some wrinkles that are going on even within the light part. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do here is the really interesting section, which is going through and painting the highlights on this cloth. That's really going to start to make it pop and make it look cool. So a little bit of shadow there coming down. Looks nice. Go lighter just to be able to finish this off at the bottom. I like the texture that this is giving me. It kind of feels like vine charcoal. All right, so that's all looking pretty good to me. We don't really have too many lights that are coming over on this side, so I can make it a little bit darker. I'm just going to off click real quick just to see how things are looking. Let's turn off my sketch as well, just to have a look, and let me back up on my painting. So I really should, while I'm working, have my navigator open. There we go. And within the navigator, yeah, it's looking pretty cool. So we've definitely got the stripes going on for the circus tent, which is what I'm looking for. And now I'm going to brighten this up just a little bit on that lighter layer and pull and push some of the lighting into this section. All right, new layer on top, and let's grab the brightest color that I'm seeing within here. So in my super bright highlights on the cloth, that's my bright color. And watch what this is going to do, you guys. It's going to look really, really cool after this. So we've got the cloth that is directly behind here, and I want to turn my brush back up. Let's start off really high at 83%. Give it some wrinkles, just making a little bit of noise. Now, there's something that I need to do with the iron rods that are making up this chandelier type shape that's in front of this cloth. There we go. Work well for me. Now, let's go in. Get the highlights going on with this. Again, I already drew my shadows in just a moment ago. So I have a pretty good spot to be able to highlight all this stuff. You know, it's looking good. Get another highlight going on in the back of this one. And we're just brightening it up a lot, a lot. There we go. We're going to be able to better describe that cloth. Just a moment. Forget that we've got wrinkles where the light's not entirely going to be able to hit. So we want the light to hit on the top here. Let's pretend this is sort of a top fold. It's catching the lip of a lot of the lighting. That looks good to me. Bring it on around. We'll pretend that section is not quite, is maybe in a little bit more shadow. So next up, turn this bad boy down to 30% for the highlights. And now I'm going to start working through some of these secondary shadow areas. So let's imagine there's another sort of fold that's protruding over here and over here. And at 30%, I can really slowly build into those lighting sections as they occur. Now I'm in a pretty good spot. I can start thinking through with the 30% lighting going on. It's going to brighten up all this stuff as I start to put the lights. Brightening it up. Okay, now let's go in and let's put some of that bright light. So next thing I want to think about is that's where the lighting is illuminating. You can see within my navigator over here how well that's starting to look, but this is starting to look pretty dark. I'm going to have a lot of light that is coming off of this this machine within the foreground. So let me zoom back. I'm working at 31%, and if I check this my reference image again, I can see that they've created very smartly a gradient kind of going right through the center of this shot. We still got those lines, we still got those wrinkles that we created earlier. I just haven't disappeared. But we've got kind of a bright spot. They're illuminating. I like that. Now I can see if you're looking at my navigator over here on the left-hand side, you can see how much that is helping out this entire scene. So when I off click, we've got those highlights within there. Within the navigator, it's looking pretty nice. It's looking really good. Next thing that I need to do is go in and start highlighting that really dark material that's going in. We haven't added any bright spots to that yet. So when I go in here and look at it, that is sort of one of the brightest little areas. I don't want to go all the way in here because I've already got my white over the top of it, but I want to add some highlights to this cloth also, so that it's matching and it doesn't just feel disconnected. All right, so back down to that first layer. And I've got my shadow path that I've applied inside of there. I'm still working at 30%. When I hit my brush, my smoothing is set to 20. And this one, I can, since I'm already at 30%, I can start working from the outside. So let's just go in and let's pull up some of those highlights that are going on. Working on the outside, and got some highlights going on within here too, which is looking pretty good. I like it. That's helping soften that. And now let's get the highlights going on the inside of the cloth. So same deal. I'm going to bring my brush quite a bit higher. And this should create sort of as too high. Let's create 36%. Let's create so same deal. Let's pretend that that's a lip that's starting to catch some of the lighting. There we go. Again, getting those wrinkles in there. My shapes to be a little bit more disturbed. There we go. Get some of this lighting pushing on up out of there. And you can see how I am weaving this lighting underneath those bright lights. And it's really starting to look pretty realistic with the way that I'm building this up. And this is just one little section in this painting. As I move further back, I should have less detail going on. This is all on its own layer as well, which is really nice for me. So at the very end here, I've got a few more little highlights that I can pull. So we'll say that there's just a little bit of it going on in this section. I don't want it to be too bright. I'm gonna create a lot less of those. Let's pretend that's hitting just a little bit of light over here. That's starting to look pretty realistic. I like it. Zoom out. And just that quick, we've got some really nice cloth that is layered and built up within this section. So, polishing details. I'm going to go in and I'm going to brighten up just whatever is showing up right around these lights within this section. So I'm just giving it a little bit more of a highlight, some heat spots right around there. Oh, that's it. Okay, cool. So let's off click and have a look. And that's pretty cool. So just this quickly, I want to turn off my layers real quick so you guys can see everything that I did. So I've just created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. And within those 5 layers, working through the shadows on one color and then to the highlights, that's where we were at just a moment ago. And this is where we're at now with the cloth. So I think that's a pretty good improvement within that section. I said that there's something that I wanted to do with the chandelier, and since I was getting in that close, you notice how I'm not working super micro. I'm still working pretty far back within all of these choices that I'm making visually. So from here within the chandelier, what I want to do, because I imagine this is being metallic, it looks like it's all on one layer. Just going to select that layer, and I want to go in and grab one of my darker tones. I'm going to be playing around with this just to make sure that it works, but I'm at 100% on my brush right now. And I'm giving it, even in the brightest spots on the shot, just a little bit of that metallic reflectiveness, right? That's reflecting some other things within my scene and giving it those tight little highlights and shadows. This should help out quite a bit to be able to make this look more realistic and actually stand out within the shot. All right, there we go. Edge. And last thing I want to do with this chandelier, now that I've got it nice and bright, is grab some of my super ultra white here, and I'm going to start painting in super bright highlights on it, just to be able to match. And get it to pop with everything else that is super bright within this section. So even within those light areas, right, there's still, give that a little bit of a highlight right here on the edge. That looks nice. Bit of tracing, a little bit of extra detail. Working pretty good. All right, so off click that. And yeah, that's giving me just that little bit of texture and contrast that it needs within that section. Let's see it without it. And you feel like, yeah, it's kind of undone, but now it actually feels metallic and feels like it's a part of the scene. So that's working for me. Next up, we've got the triangular section up here at the top of this guy. So I'm going to turn my sketch back on for this just to be able to remember what the heck I had planned for it. And let's reference the reference image. So within the reference image, they kind of have this really cool industrial handrail. I was thinking more something along the lines of that being a tighter cloth or a little bit of a pattern that's going on here with the tassels that are hanging down. And then I can actually make the top portion of it more structural. Will work just fine for me. So let's get that started. I'm going to turn down my lighting here on my sketch. I'm working underneath it. And I'm going to start from the back on this thing. So where are our darkest colors? Right here. I'm up on, no, actually I should work on top of all that stuff that I just created. Sorry. There we go. Super highlight. Just giving it a color so I can kind of get back to it easy and know where I'm working from. Let's go through with the same process again. So I'm going to grab whatever my middle tone is, put it right around there. Brush it up to 100%. That'll work well for me. All right. So I am not spending the next 3 hours coloring inside of these little tiny shapes, right? That is how you break your hand right off. I don't want you guys to do that. I want you to work smart in this course. Show you a trick. Righty. So now let's go in here. Got those colored in. One, holding down the shift button with my magic wand. And of course, I get the last one off, but that's okay. So let's go ahead and let's go to my selection, modify, and expand by 3. It's pretty good. And now I'm going to go with my bucket fill. Gosh, that's taking too long. Too many clicks. Oh, there we go. I just created a new layer. Hitting Control E on my keyboard to merge down. And now I've got all that stuff filled in, just that easy. So on top of here, I'm in a good position. I'm going to grab that blackest black because this is such an overlay. Just adding some unison or unity, these sort of messy lines up at the top. Let's put some of that dark color coming back in here. Ambient occlusion, rougher lines. All working well for me. And then I said that I wanted to have some type of shelf right within this section. I'm gonna make that a little bit sharper. I don't have my region selected. I'm just freestyling this for right now. There we go. That'll work well for me. Yeah, and I'm in a pretty good spot. Let's see. So next up, next things that I need on this. I'm going to go ahead and grab this first layer, and it's not helping me out too much. Let's imagine the lighting, right? We've got that super bright lighting. It's starting to fade off right here. It is still affecting this lip. So I'm working at 100% right now. I'm going to give it just a little bit of lighting, and I'm going to let that light taper off right around this section. So looking at brighter right around here. I can use the the dodge tool at the base of this thing right around this part, just to be able to light it up a little bit as we get closer. And then I can turn around. I don't want to use the burn tool quite yet, but I do need to get some other shading going on within this part as it moves up. So I'm going to hit B to get back to my brush. Let's turn the brush down to 51%. And this section to have a little bit more shading to it, as if it's not quite hitting the light. A little bit of texture, this part. A bit of texture going on in here as well. So we got a little bit of a shelf, a little bit of a lip that we're creating. Working, darken it up as we get to the center, just so that we're adding a little bit more contrast there. That'll look nice. All right, that's all looking pretty good. We're getting through it quick enough. And then we still got a second highlight for where that shelf is going to be. So the second highlight, let's pretend that it's a different material. So it's going to get a brighter highlight on it. And let's fade that highlight away towards the edge. All right, nice bright highlight here. That's looking good. And let's just keep some of that same super bright highlight going on within this section, just to be able to describe the shape of that lip a little bit better. And last thing I want to do with this is, let's go back to declick, right click, and get back to my layer. And I'm going to use that dodge tool. Now, if you overuse the dodge tool, if you overuse the smudge tool, people will be able to tell. They're going to be able to spot that a mile away within your painting. So you don't always want to use these things. These are for little polish moments within your piece. All right, so we got one color there. It's working pretty good. Zoom out, have a look at it. Yeah, and now we've got a pretty well painted secondary color that's going on within this section, just to be able to give us a little bit more detail before we get up into the mess that is all that jungly stuff up there. Now, what's going to happen? One thing I want to do up on top here, I might do this tonight too, is these big sort of circular shapes that look like half a globe with the longitude and latitude lines. I want those to be glowing. So I'm going to add some lights and some illumination going on inside of that, and I want that to affect this wrought iron post that I've created within that piece. So that's going to have some stuff here in a second. But for now, let's go in. I've got my very top layer. It's going to be these guys. All right. And on top of that, let's go in and let's get those tassels going on in there. So I imagine the tassels being pretty white. So they'll actually show up on all this contrast that I'm creating right now. And you guessed it, I'm going to use sort of the same trick that I did just a moment ago. Getting going back here as well. That's where I imagine they're coming from, trying to keep my lines as straight up and down as possible. I could hold shift while I'm doing this, but I'll create a straight line within Photoshop. See how that looks. Yeah, that's just a little bit of rhythm that I needed. So same deal. I'm going to go through really quick. We got them nice and bright here in the middle, and let's just start to darken those guys up, especially here on the back side so that we can really see them against that light. I'll give them just a little bit of darkness up at the top where they're connecting so they're not quite as bright. Using the burn tool to be able to do this very quickly. And now they feel more integrated into our scene, and that's looking really nice. That's exactly what I had in mind for just a nice little tertiary detail within that portion. And when we look at this over on our navigator on the left-hand side here, my smaller view, they're kind of equal right now. It's really got a lot of nice detail that we're starting to create within this section. I'm pretty happy with it. So I'm going to pause the video just for a second, and we'll get back to recording here in a moment. I am just going to take a little break. I feel like if I start working on the lighting up here, I'm going to start moving too fast, and it's not going to turn out as well as I'd like for it to. So breaks are important when you're working in 3D, or sorry, when you're doing digital painting.